Let's jump into the fun stuff, the stats, the stuff that everybody actually enjoys. Numbers, graphs. I'm assuming everybody likes that. Hi, my name is Adriana, and today I will be going over my reading stats for the year of 2023. Crazy. So I typically do kind of monthly stats, quarterly goal check-ins. This is going to kind of be all of that plus a little more because I haven't really prepared my stats per se specifically for this video. I keep my kind of running database of books I've read in a Google Sheet. I have that connected to Google Looker Studio that kind of automatically refreshes all of my graphs and pivot tables and everything else. So I kind of figured for this video we would just look at my goals from 2023, see what I did, and then look at just kind of everything I keep track of and see where we're at and how I feel about it and comment on it and learn together. So I got a blazer, I got some coffee. I think this is gonna go well. So we'll start off with my goals that I had set for myself in 2023. Match my page count. So for that, what I need to do is take a look at my Google Looker page. I'm pretty sure I'm there, but it's just good to check. So I have a couple different reports that I've put together. This is probably the one that is most pertinent for that. So I'm going to filter this all down to just 2023, and I read 23,566 pages. So check that one off the box. So the next goal I had was to read the Odyssey and the Iliad. I did neither of those. Just never really felt like it. Like, it's probably too late for me to do a 30 by 30, but I could maybe try to make a new goal to read these by the time I turn 30. We'll see. Shadow of the Gods, I did read. I scraped that in right under the wire, read it in December, so we're good on that. Reduced physical TBR by 50% down to 16 books. I know I'm not there, but let's take a look and see how bad I did do. So I have another tile on a different report for this one, and I believe it's this bad boy right here. Let's double check and make sure. Yeah, this is my count of, so I have 39 books on my TBR, which means not only did I fail this goal, but I actually have more books on my TBR, my physical TBR this year than I did last year. I pretty much skunked myself on this one. Book spending, that is once again on the report. So looking at this report, bringing it down to just 2023, I spent a total of $1,091 on books. So let's see if I skunked myself on this one as well. So according to that goal, I spent $1,062.70. And this year I've spent $20 more than that. So once again, skunked myself on that goal. But NetGalley, I am at a ratio of 78%. And I think for the past couple of months I've been above 75. So that one, we're good. So how many? I hit 3 out of my 6 goals. So there's goals. Before we jump into the more fun stats, please consider liking and commenting on this video and subscribing to my channel if you like bookish things. That semi-negativity out of the way, let's jump into the fun stuff, the stats, the stuff that everybody actually enjoys. Numbers, graphs. I'm assuming everybody likes that. So looking at 2023, like I mentioned before, I read 23,566 pages. 366 hours of audiobook were listened to. So not necessarily that I spent that much time because I usually listen to an audiobook at like a higher speed, but the total length of audiobooks was 366 hours. And then my average page length for my eyeball reads was 351.73 pages, which I think is down from last year. It is what it is. My average rating for this year was a 3.72. And then this is my breakdown for format. I still barely mostly read ebooks, 34% 4% audiobook, and then between hardback and paperback we're like 27%. So I feel pretty good about that. I'm still reading a majority eyeball reads, so it is what it is. This is the breakdown of my ratings. Most of the time I rate stuff a 4, which makes sense. I will typically give something a 4 if I just like enjoyed it, had a really good time, but just there was something not quite there. And I would say that would pretty accurately describe most of the books I read this year. I did a lot of like no ratings for stuff that I just didn't want to give ratings to. And then a couple 2 stars, 2.5, 3s, you know, all up in there. So jumping into genre, most of what I read this year was fantasy. That makes sense. I typically read a lot of fantasy. I am kind of surprised that my next largest genre was mystery thriller. That is typically not one I gravitate toward. Historical fiction, I do think that feels right. Nonfiction, that feels right. Sci-fi, literary fiction, romance, that all makes sense. And then the sources where I got these books from, over half of them I got from the library. And don't let me mislead you, a lot of times I will read stuff from the library, but then if I like it, I will go out and buy it. So I'm not necessarily tracking my savings using the library like I used to, because I've gotten in this habit that if I enjoy a book I read from the library, I will buy it in a physical copy, because I like to have nice shelves, and I like to have shelves that have stuff that I like reading. So I still think that's better than me just going out and buying every book I want to try to read, because there have been some books that I read from the library and I'm like, I don't need to own this one. So I did save myself money that way. So now looking at series, I guess this is just kind of my series report, what I read, whether or not it was in a series, whatever. So looking at this, most of what I read was a standalone. I do prefer standalones. Not that I prefer them in like a story sense, but more of just an investment sense. I get a little intimidated by having to read a lot to enjoy a story. And a standalone is just like you just have to read one book to enjoy the full story. That is why I tend to gravitate towards standalones, especially at this 58% series. So it looks like I read 26 first books in a series. 26 first books in a series? Okay, so when I click on this number, it will update this list to show which series I started. Okay, so... Okay, so realistically, there was like 7 series I legitimately started, but there was 26 first books I read. I continued on with 15 series. I guess that's not necessarily true. I could have read multiple in the same series, and I probably did because I read multiple James Rollins. And I only ended 2 series. Which 2 were those? Okay, yep, I only ended 2 series this year. Okay, so we saw this page earlier, but figured we would jump into it again and look at it a little more in depth. So what this graph shows is how many pages I read each quarter. So starting in Q1, obviously every year starts at 0, so I don't really have a solid data point for that, but just imagine all these lines continue down to 0. And then quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. So you can see 2023 just read so much more than all the rest of the years, which is great. 2023 is this purple line. What I do find interesting, and I don't know how well this is going to show up because it's kind of hard to see, but in 2023 you can see the steepness or the slope of the line if you remember algebra from middle school or high school. The slope of the line of 2023 between quarter 1 and quarter 2 is like so much steeper than everything else, but then it pretty much, wow, I pretty much stayed on track through Q3 and Q4, but then you look at 2022 and like I was reading that last quarter of 2022 and like a lot of the other ones, so it's kind of interesting I didn't continue on with that same trend in 2023. I guess I just didn't really, I wasn't reading. during the holiday season, like I was in other holiday seasons. We've already covered this number, my physical TBR, how much money I spent on books, how many audiobooks I listened to. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I read 103 books, which is crazy. Like, I always set my like Goodreads goal at like 52, although this year I guess I set it for 80. I typically set it for like 52. I want to try to aim for like at least a book a week, and I surpassed that. So I think it was by October I kind of realized I could reach 100 books by the end of the year, and so then it was like a soft goal to try to get to 100 books by the end of the year. And then these two graphs show where I got my books from. This year, most of my books came from my local bookstore, St. Books, and I love them for that. Shouts to May. Love her. And then Illumicrate, which I've canceled all my BookBox subscriptions. I'm not into it anymore. I don't really need a special fancy edition book. They're really, really expensive. It would be interesting to see, like, a lot of this $1,000 is the 11 books I bought from Illumicrate and Fairy Loot. Pango Books is a used book website that I buy from occasionally, especially since I sell a couple books on there. So if I have Pango money, I can just then turn that into more books. Fairy Loot, like I mentioned, that's done. We're not doing it anymore. That's an indie bookstore. Libro FM. It's like an audiobook service that I've bought 2 books from, I guess, this year. Barnes & Noble, Costco, and then others. Not quite sure what the others are, but it's other. And so then this one on the right is just kind of grouping all of these individual sources into kind of more general categories. So indie bookstore, 46.9%. So most of the books I bought were from an indie bookstore, which is great. 32% of the books I bought were from a book subscription, and most of those are like $30 plus. So let's see, that's 16 books. Let's just say an average price for my book subscription was like $35 when you include like shipping and stuff.
2 + 2 is 4, -1, that's 3, quick maths.
So that's $560 about that I spent on book subscriptions. So yeah, that's 51% of the money I spent on books, and it was only 32% of the books I actually received. I don't need BookBox subscriptions. That's insane. 50% of my spending, but only 32% of my new books. Gross. We hate that. 6% of the books I bought were used, a big bookstore, and then other. This could be like Costco maybe. I don't know. So this last report is kind of a ratings breakdown by genre, and I have like my grand total of my average rating of books across the bottom. This year has the lowest rating of all my years. I have been tracking my reading, which I've read a lot more, so I guess I don't really know what to say to that. But I mean, in like 2019, I really hadn't gotten into reading yet. I think I only read like 11 books, but like the 11 I was picking, I was really like, I know I'm going to enjoy this book, and I'm spending a lot of time investing into it because I didn't read a lot or very fast. Now it's like I can afford to read a couple stinkers because I read a lot. But looking at my ratings breakdown across genres, looks like my lowest is a 3.5, and that's in romance. And then my highest looks like it was mystery thriller, which is gonna include a lot of my James Rowlands, my Preston and Childs, a lot of series that I have a lot of like nostalgia and investment in, so that also makes sense. Next highest is nonfiction, which again makes sense. I really only rate nonfiction if it's especially good or especially bad, in which case I'm giving it either like a 5-star or like a 1-star. But other than that, it looks like everything's fairly even. I don't really think anything is super out of the range of anything else. So I think with that being done with my, Looker reports, we'll just take a quick look into my reading stats spreadsheet. So up here you can see I have something I call quick stats,
quick maths,
which is just, again, a quick look at the stats and years past. So we can see average page length going back to 2019 and how it gets almost progressively smaller, except for last year when I really wanted to focus on some more bigger books. Average page length and median page length, this is something I do just to kind of like get a feel for how normal the distribution is of the book's page length that I'm reading. So you can see like 2019, the average page length was 460, but the median page length was 435. This means that my average page length was being heavily weighted by a couple really big books, and it wasn't necessarily true that I was reading a high number of large books. It's that I just had a couple really large books versus like this year where my average page length was 351, but my median page length was 354. Because those are so close, I was reading across the spectrum of book length. I wasn't reading a ton of small books, I wasn't reading a ton of large books, semi-evenly distributed on either side of that. I guess 2021 you see the opposite, where my median page length was 370, my average page length was 360. This means I had a couple small books dragging that average down, if that makes sense. I don't know. I'm a stats nerd. I like these things. Total money spent on books. Oh, I did that math wrong. I wonder if I did the math wrong when I set the goal or when I did it just now. But total money spent on books, I am actually lower than I was last year by $10 whole. So feeling good about that. Average rating we had already looked at. Percent read of purchased. So this is kind of misleading because the way I set up this formula is that I have this here where I keep track of all my purchases and I just check whether or not I've read them. And in here, it's only looking at like that year's. So I've read 81% of the book. I read 81% of the books I bought in 2022, but I didn't necessarily read all those in 2022. So looking at 2023 where it says I've only read 50%, I can still read those. So that number will change as the year goes on and I read some of the books that I bought this year. No need to freak out, but I don't know why you would freak out. No need for me to freak out. This is a look at the average number of days it took me to read a book. So like I said, in 2019, it took me a long time to read one book. And now I'm down to under a week, which is great. And then total books read, like I said, this year I was at 103. Last year I was pretty dang close. 65, 26, 11. We love to see it. I mean, I'm probably pretty close to reaching a limit of what I can reasonably read in a year, around this 90 to 100 book mark, but we'll see what it looks like going forward. I think those are all my stats. So right at the end here, we can do just some YouTube stats and how this channel is doing. I, in this year, gained a total of 265 subscribers, which is super awesome. I posted 60 videos, which is great. One of my kind of soft goals year to year is to try to post at least once a week, and this shows that I did that. And then I posted 7 shorts. I'm a little more active on TikTok than I am on YouTube Shorts, but not by a whole lot. I don't post a lot of TikToks or short form content. I prefer hanging out and talking. But I think those are all the stats. Those are all the things, all the stats. If I missed anything, I might release a YouTube short about it. We'll up that number for next year. Please let me know what your favorite stats to track are, and thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.